camera remains still as December 1989 settles over Bucharest. A cold mist clings to the ancient buildings, and the city braces for something far more chilling than the biting winter air. An eerie silence blankets the square, broken only by faint murmurs that spread like whispers of a brewing storm. The crowd stands still, their faces pale and tense, the cold sinking into their bones, but it's the heavy tension in the air that causes the deepest chill. Your gaze drifts to the podium, where Ceaușescu stands. Flanked by bodyguards, the man who has ruled with an iron fist for 2 decades scans the crowd, his gaze calculating, a face of authority, of oppression. For years, fear and whispers of disappearances have shaped the nation, unspoken, but felt by all. He raises his hand, and the crowd, stiff and uncertain, begins to clap. The applause is forced, too rehearsed, its hollowness impossible to ignore. On screen, the camera captures each movement, each smile, but you begin to question how much of this is real. The facade cracks. Applause falters, awkward and nervous, and the first murmurs of unease ripple through the crowd. Their silence, now broken by faint whispers, speaks louder than the artificial claps. The air grows thick with tension, the storm of truth now ready to break. Suddenly, a shout cuts through the oppressive atmosphere, a voice raw with frustration. It strikes like lightning, sending ripples of shock through the crowd. Heads turn, a murmur builds, and the ground beneath you seems to shift. Something is breaking. The protests have begun. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, don't just watch, be a part of this story. Make sure you're subscribed to CrimeCore X so you don't miss the next chapter in this gripping tale. History is unfolding before your eyes, and if you're not subscribing yet, you're missing out on the rest of the story. What's holding you back? Drop a comment below to let us know, and don't forget to hit that bell so you stay in the loop. Ceaușescu steps up to the podium again, his eyes scanning the crowd, unaware that the air has shifted. The tension is palpable, thickening as his voice rises, but it fails to mask the unease spreading through the crowd. The broadcast, once a polished image of control, begins to crack. A faint, pre-recorded applause sounds too practiced, too controlled, like a desperate attempt to cover the truth. The crowd shifts, faces tense with the discomfort, their applause a hollow echo. Ceaușescu speaks of unity and a bright future, but his words fall flat. The audience is no longer listening, their faces betraying a deep sense of disconnection. The cheers are forced, the smiles uneasy, a mere performance to hide the growing resistance beneath. Then, the first shout, a voice rises sharply above the noise, raw with frustration. Liar! The word strikes like thunder, echoing across the square. The ground seems to tremble, and heads turn in shock. This is the moment, the breaking point. Ceaușescu's voice falters as the first chants rise, louder than his words. The crowd no longer hides their anger, their discomfort now replaced by open defiance. The dam has cracked, and there is no going back. The rally, once a symbol of his control, now feels like a funeral march. What was meant to display unity has become a battlefield between the regime's past and the future breaking through the cracks. The crowd is no longer passive. They have found their voice. As the chants grow louder, Ceaușescu presses on, his gestures desperate. But the more he speaks, the less power his words hold. This rally, intended to secure his reign, now marks the beginning of his undoing. Without warning, a loud, defiant voice breaks through the calm, cutting through Ceaușescu's speech like a jagged blade. The sound reverberates across the square, and in that single moment, everything changes. The carefully constructed image of unity begins to splinter, and the tension in the air becomes tangible, thick with defiance. The protesters' voices swell, rising over the dictator's words, drowning them out in a tide of fury. The crowd, once passive and obedient, now stirs with purpose. The cameras, initially focused on Ceaușescu's controlled performance, begin to capture something far different. Glimpses of chaos, of unrest that the regime can no longer suppress. Behind the lens, the cameramen struggle to maintain the illusion, their shaky hands betraying the growing fear that the situation is slipping out of control. The protesters surge forward, their movements uncoordinated but powerful, a raw, instinctive force. The barriers that had once kept them in check begin to shake, and the cameras capture the growing desperation in the eyes of the guards. Ceaușescu watches from the podium, his expression flickering with disbelief as the crowd's chants become a tidal wave of anger. He tries to maintain his composure, but the realization hits him too late. The power he had taken for granted is slipping away, and the people are taking back control. What had been a display of dominance now feels like a hollow ritual, a funeral procession for a regime already dead. The facade of unity, once carefully crafted, crumbles in real time. Ceaușescu's speeches, once a tool of control, are now just words lost in the growing noise of revolt. His gestures, once grand, now seem pathetic as the chants of rebellion rise above his voice, shattering his carefully constructed reality. The scene has shifted. What was meant to be a show of strength now becomes a battleground. The people's discomfort is no longer hidden behind forced applause. It has transformed into a collective outcry, a cry for freedom that can no longer be ignored. The crowd is no longer just passive observers of history. They are the agents of change, the ones writing the future with their voices and their actions. Ceaușescu presses on, his words growing more frantic as he desperately tries to regain control. His gestures become exaggerated, his attempts to rally the crowd growing more desperate. But with each passing moment, the truth becomes clearer. The regime is over, and no amount of shouting or command can turn back the tide of rebellion. In the distance, the military stands poised, unsure whether to support or suppress the uprising. Their hesitation speaks volumes about the collapsing foundation of the regime. The doubt, the uncertainty that had once been unthinkable, now festers in the hearts of those who once held power. The regime is fracturing, and its death is being broadcast to the entire world. The chants rise, louder than ever, and the protest spreads like wildfire. The rally that was supposed to reinforce Ceaușescu's power has become the moment of its destruction. The people have rejected him. The country has rejected him. The future has arrived, and it will not be denied. The mask of control has slipped, and with it, Ceaușescu's reign. The orders come down with chilling precision. Ceaușescu, ever the deluded leader, demands swift, ruthless action from the military. No hesitation, no mercy. The roar of tanks rumbles through the streets, shaking the very ground beneath the feet of those who had come to demand their freedom. The military machine, once a tool of unquestioned obedience, now rumbles to life, as if summoned by the last desperate breaths of a dying regime. Bucharest, the heart of Romania, trembles as the tanks roll down its streets. The once proud city, home to grand monuments and the imposing palaces of Ceaușescu's power, now feels like a battlefield. The harsh sound of treads scraping the asphalt is a constant reminder that the streets, once filled with the silent reverence for the regime, are now being scarred by the violence of a dictator trying to hold on to what remains of his crumbling empire. Snipers are ordered to take their positions, their rifles trained on the crowd that dares to challenge the regime. The first shots ring out, sharp and brutal, followed by the gut-wrenching screams of those who fall. The silence of the square is shattered by the cries of the wounded, their voices rising above the gunfire. Blood begins to stain the cold ground beneath their feet, a grim reminder that Ceaușescu's grip on Romania will be secured through violence, through fear, through bloodshed. The people scatter, their survival instincts kicking in as they flee from the military onslaught. But the streets offer no refuge. The tanks advance, their iron treads crushing everything in their path. Ceaușescu's orders are clear: suppress the uprising by any means necessary. His once beloved military is now his instrument of destruction, and the people once his subjects have become his enemies. Yet, despite the violence unfolding before him, Ceaușescu clings to the delusion that his iron will can restore order. He watches the chaos unfold on the television, his eyes scanning the screens, unable to grasp the truth that his power is slipping. His belief in control is unshaken. He believes that the bloodshed will quell the rebellion, that the people will fear him once again. But with every shot fired, every life taken, the resistance grows stronger. The people are no longer afraid of their oppressor. They are fighting for something greater than their lives. They are fighting for freedom. Ceaușescu orders the crackdown to intensify, his voice growing more frantic, his commands more desperate. His speeches, once commanding and decisive, now sound like empty echoes in the halls of his crumbling regime. Each command to escalate the violence becomes a nail in the coffin of his rule. The people, once cowed by his authority, are no longer silent. They rise in defiance, and their anger fuels the fire of their resistance. The streets are now a battleground, filled with the sounds of gunfire, the screams of the oppressed, and the roar of the tanks. What was once the symbol of Ceaușescu's power is now a theater of war, a place where the blood of his people stains the ground in a final act of defiance. The dictator, who had once commanded unquestioning loyalty, now stands as a figure of absurdity, desperately clinging to the shattered remnants of his empire. As the military continues its assault, Ceaușescu remains ensconced in his delusion. He gives more orders, tightening his grip, unaware that he is digging his own grave. The regime is not only fighting the people, it is fighting its own inevitable collapse. Every bullet fired, every life taken, only accelerates the fall of the empire he had built on fear and repression. The air is thick with the smell of gunpowder and the stench of blood. The streets, once a place of quiet submission, are now filled with bodies, their lifeless forms scattered across the ground. Ceaușescu, standing in his fortress of delusion, orders more and more brutality, his mind locked in a cycle of rage and denial. But he doesn't see the truth. This is not control. This is the death rattle of a regime that cannot survive in the face of the people's will. The bodies pile up, the streets becoming a grisly testament to Ceaușescu's failure. His orders grow more desperate, more detached from the reality unfolding in the streets. Each shot fired brings him closer to his own destruction. But still, he cannot understand. His belief in his own power, once unshakable, is the very thing that has brought him to the edge of oblivion. He may have controlled Romania through fear, but now it is fear that has come for him. The people are no longer just surviving. They are fighting for something far greater. Their voices, once silenced, now rise in unison, louder and louder as they reject the tyranny that has held them captive for so long. Ceaușescu may continue to issue orders, but his empire is collapsing under the weight of its own brutality. The streets, once a symbol of his control, are now a battleground for the future, and Ceaușescu's last stand is quickly becoming a symbol of his utter failure. The roar of helicopter blades cuts through the cold, still air, but this sound no longer feels like the symbol of power it once did. Ceaușescu and his wife Elena, now desperate fugitives, are swept away in a flight that feels as fragile as the last remnants of their rule. As the helicopter ascends, there's no sense of control, no sense of victory, only an overwhelming realization that they are fleeing from the very empire they built with blood and fear. Below them, the streets of Bucharest are chaos, alive with the anger of the people they once dominated. The military, once loyal to them, is now divided, its allegiance uncertain. The air, thick with smoke and the scent of revolt, trembles beneath the helicopter's wings, as Ceaușescu clings to the fading hope that his power can be restored. The freedom he once wielded so easily now slips through his fingers like sand, and the surreal, horrifying truth begins to sink in. His empire, built on repression and cruelty, is disintegrating before his eyes. As they fly through the thickening fog, Ceaușescu's mind races. There is no plan, only a frantic need to escape, to find safety, to reclaim some semblance of control. But the helicopter, once a symbol of his invincibility, now feels like a sinking ship, a hollow vessel with no destination. His grip tightens on the armrest, but even that small gesture can't steady his shaking hands. Elena sits beside him, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. But they do not speak. The world they once controlled is fading, and their escape is nothing more than a futile attempt to outrun the collapse of everything they once believed in. The radio crackles with static, but there's no comforting voice on the other end. The military, their once loyal allies, refuse to support them. Radio signals break off in mid-sentence, leaving only silence. They are alone in the air, alone in their escape, and the desperation in the cockpit mirrors the despair below. The realization that their rule is over settles between them, unspoken but clear. They are no longer in control, there is no one to save them. The helicopter cuts through the dense fog, flying blind over a city now alien to them, a city where their once unquestioned authority no longer holds sway. Bucharest, once their kingdom, now feels distant and cold. The streets where they had once reigned, now teeming with a fury they cannot silence. They are being hunted, not just by the people but by their own crumbling system. The illusion of safety they once lived in is gone, and the world they tried to build with fear and control has turned on them. Their flight is a desperate, blind scramble. With each passing minute, the air grows thicker with the inevitability of their capture. The rotors beat steadily, but the sound is no longer the beat of triumph. It is the sound of a regime dying, of a ruler realizing that the world he shaped is slipping through his grasp. The sky, once a symbol of their untouchability, now feels oppressive, as though it too is closing in around them, suffocating them in their isolation. Below, the ground is a blur, a mix of the concrete jungle they once ruled and the chaos that has overtaken it. The people are no longer passive. They are rising, their voices reverberating in the streets. The military, once their tool of power, now stands divided, some loyal, some unsure, some emboldened by the rebellion unfolding. The balance of power is shifting, and Ceaușescu feels the heavy weight of history pressing down on him with every passing second. There is no escape. The helicopter, their last hope, is failing them. Every second that passes is a reminder that the world they knew is gone. The land below, once theirs to command, is now filled with the voices of the oppressed, demanding freedom, demanding an end to their reign. The road to safety has disappeared, and with it, the illusion of invincibility. The finality of it all becomes impossible to ignore. The helicopter, once a symbol of power, is now a symbol of defeat. It is no longer their means of escape, but a hollow vessel carrying two broken souls, fleeing from a past that has already caught up with them. Every beat of the rotors, every moment in the air, brings them closer to the inevitable truth. They are fugitives in a world that no longer has a place for them. The forces they once controlled now move against them. The rebels, the military, the people, they are all closing in. The helicopter falters, a mechanical whine cutting through the air, and in that moment, Ceaușescu knows. His rule is over. They are no longer in charge of their fate. As the helicopter descends, Ceaușescu and Elena face the inevitable. Their escape is over. The military is closing in, the people are rising, and the empire they built with cruelty and fear is crumbling. The hope for flight, for survival, is gone. The man who once ruled with impunity now faces the unforgiving truth of his downfall. The finality of it all presses down on them, and with each passing second, the inevitable capture draws closer. If you've been following the dramatic downfall of Ceaușescu, you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when we dive deeper into the dark chapters of history. This moment is just the beginning. Stay tuned. The moment of their capture comes with a crushing finality. The once untouchable rulers, Ceaușescu and his wife Elena, now reduced to mere fugitives, find themselves surrounded on all sides. The helicopter, their last hope of escape, has faltered, its rotors sputtering as it descends helplessly toward the ground. They had thought they could outrun the consequences of their reign, but the weight of history catches up with them. The distance between their world of power and their current reality has closed, and it's a brutal reckoning. The military, once their enforcers, now closes in with cold precision. The soldiers who had been loyal to them for so long are now their captors. Their faces, once filled with reverence, are now expressions of duty and resolve. The commander's voice rings out, but there is no respect, no reverence, only the blunt force of the inevitable. The irony is undeniable. Ceaușescu, the man who built his empire on fear and control, is now powerless in the face of a revolution he can't stop. As the helicopter touches down, the soldats are pulled from the wreckage. There is no ceremony, no grand gesture of defiance. Just two figures, weak, vulnerable, struggling to regain their composure as they are thrust into a new reality. Their world of power, once defined by the iron grip they held over their people, is gone. Now, they are mere prisoners bound by the same chains they imposed on others. The transformation is swift, as if the universe itself is closing the door on their reign. The sounds of the helicopter's fading blades seem to mock them, symbols of an empire that no longer exists. They are escorted through the streets, but it's not the triumphant march they had once dreamed of. The crowds that once stood in awe of their power are now distant, watching in quiet judgment. There is no adoration, no fanfare, only the gaze of a country that has turned its back on them. The very streets that were once filled with their loyalists are now filled with people who have tasted freedom. The suppositors are not greeted as fallen rulers, but as criminals, their fate sealed by the revolution they could not quell. The cold, sterile confines of the military barracks are a far cry from the luxurious palaces and grand speeches that once defined their lives. The sharp, oppressive walls close in on them as they are placed in separate holding cells. The reality of their collapse sets in as they sit in the cold dark, their bodies shrinking in size, their dignity slipping away with every passing moment. Ceaușescu, once so confident, now appears like a broken man, his movements slow, his eyes clouded with confusion. The world he knew is no longer the same, and every inch of the prison cell seems to press against him, reminding him of his fragility. Elena, ever by his side, shares in his downfall, though her own emotions are more difficult to read. She is the same woman who once held the nation's attention with her poise and grace, but now she is a prisoner of history's judgment. Her face, once filled with pride, now shows only the rawness of a woman caught in a moment of reckoning. She, too, is no longer the symbol of power she once was. The sharp lines of the past are fading, replaced by the bleak contours of the present. The cell is sparse, nothing like the grand offices where they once commanded legions. Ceaușescu stares at the concrete walls, a haunted look in his eyes. He had ruled with an iron fist, and now that same fist is crushed by the weight of his own delusions. The world has changed, and he is no longer a part of it. His thoughts race, but there is no escape now. No speeches, no loyal followers, no walls of protection. Only a cell, its cold stone walls pressing in on him, reminding him that the very system he built is now his prison. His mind, once sharp and calculating, is now clouded with the weight of his failure. He had thought himself invincible, that his control over the nation was unbreakable, but now he sits, shackled and humiliated, surrounded by the forces of a new world. The anger, the pride, the defiance, all of it crumbles away as he sits in the shadow of his own downfall. Elena too remains silent, her eyes cast downward, understanding that the end has come. Their once untouchable power is now a memory, fading quickly. The soldiers guarding their cell offer no sympathy. There is no respect for the fallen dictator, no reverence for the past. To them, Ceaușescu is nothing more than a relic, a symbol of a dark history that must be erased. The respect he once commanded is gone, replaced by the indifference of a nation that has finally risen from the grip of his tyranny. The truth presses in on Ceaușescu, and the weight of it is suffocating. The revolution is over, and he has lost. There is no escape, no more orders to give, no more speeches to make. The world he built is gone, and now he is left to face the consequences. He had been the ruler of a nation, the architect of its fate, but now, in the cold cell, he is just a man, vulnerable, defeated, and forgotten by the very people he once controlled. His fate is sealed. The revolution has triumphed, and Ceaușescu's rule has ended in the very prison he once created for others. He is no longer the man who ruled with an iron fist. He is just another prisoner of history, caught in the trap of his own making, with no way out. The courtroom is stark, a place where the finality of justice feels suffocating, its cold, indifferent walls pressing in on those who stand within. The air hangs heavy with the weight of history, the consequence of decades of oppression now poised to be reckoned with. Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu stand before their accusers, shackled, their hands bound not only by the physical chains, but by the judgment of a nation that has turned its back on them. The new government has moved swiftly to hold the Ceaușescus accountable. In an unprecedented move, they have set up an emergency military tribunal, determined to act without delay, to make an example of the fallen rulers. In just 2 hours, the charges are read: genocide, economic destruction, the theft of a nation's wealth. Each accusation strikes with surgical precision, each word a reminder of the regime's brutality and the suffering it has caused. These charges are not just a formality, they are the full weight of history coming down on the Ceaușescu's heads. For Ceaușescu, the trial is a nightmare come to life. His face, once a mask of absolute control, now betrays a flicker of disbelief. He had never once considered that he would be held accountable, never thought the world could turn on him so completely. His eyes dart around the courtroom, searching for something, a sign, a gesture, any form of support. But there is nothing. The crowd outside, the people who had once feared him, now stand in judgment. The nation he once ruled with terror is now his accuser. Illegal, Ceaușescu spits out, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. This trial is a farce, a mockery of justice. His words hang in the air, but they hold no power. The soldiers who guard him show no reaction, their faces unreadable. There is no defense here, no room for the dictator to wield his authority. His voice, once commanding, now seems out of place in this sterile, unforgiving courtroom. He refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of the proceedings, but deep down, he knows it is already too late. The judgment has been passed. The world has moved on. Beside him, Elena stands silently, her face pale and drawn. She too understands the gravity of the situation. Gone are the days when her presence could command a room, when she could sway the course of events with a glance or a word. Now, she is just another prisoner, shackled by the chains of a revolution that has swept away everything they once held dear. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, are clouded with confusion. But there is no longer any hope. The world they built is gone, and they have no place in the new order. The prosecutor's voice cuts through the air like a blade, reading off the charges one by one, the words falling with a finality that echoes in the hearts of everyone in the room. There is no defense. Ceaușescu tries to speak, to object, to justify his actions, but his words fall flat. The tribunal, acting quickly and without mercy, moves forward with brutal efficiency. There is no room for appeals, no space for negotiation. The outcome is already sealed. The people have spoken. The revolution has triumphed, and the last remnants of Ceaușescu's power lie shattered at his feet. Outside the courtroom, the world watches, the eyes of the nation fixed on this pivotal moment. For decades, the people of Romania lived in fear of their dictator, their lives shaped by his oppressive rule. Now, they are free to witness his fall, to see him held accountable for the suffering he caused. The once feared leader is now nothing more than a broken man, shackled and defenseless, a symbol of a past that must be buried. As the trial proceeds, the prosecutor's voice grows steady, unwavering. The charges against Ceaușescu are read in rapid succession, each one more damning than the last. There is no sympathy, no space for the dictator to defend himself. The new government is determined to make a point, to show that no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond the reach of justice. The people who once suffered in silence are now witnessing the moment they had been waiting for. This is their reckoning, and it will not be denied. Ceaușescu remains defiant, but his confidence has crumbled. He tries to cling to the past, to assert his authority in a world that has already moved on. But it is futile. The revolution he sought to crush has already succeeded, and he is now nothing more than a prisoner of the very system he created. His power, once absolute, is now gone, and the trial becomes a public spectacle, an execution of not just Ceaușescu, but of the entire regime he built. In the final moments of the trial, Ceaușescu's voice fades into nothing. The decision is made. There is no debate, no second thoughts. His fate is sealed by the very people he once tried to destroy. The courtroom, cold and indifferent, echoes with the sounds of a new era being born. The old world is gone, and in its place, a new Romania is rising, one free from the oppression that defined its past. The cold air presses in as the Ceaușescus are led outside, each step toward the firing squad, a final, irreversible descent into the reality they can no longer escape. The weight of their fate presses on their shoulders, heavier than the cold that cuts through their clothes, heavier than the years of absolute power that have suddenly crumbled. They had been the face of Romania's oppression, the architects of its suffering, but now they are nothing more than prisoners, vulnerable and exposed in a world that has rejected them. Elena's breath is ragged, her chest rising and falling in frantic, sharp movements as she struggles to maintain composure. Her eyes dart around, searching for an escape that no longer exists. But it's futile. She begins to scream, her voice raw with fear and anger, a primal sound that breaks the cold silence around them. The words come in violent bursts, pleading, cursing, but none of it matters now. She is not ready to surrender, not ready to face the end. Her scream cuts through the air, echoing the desperation in her heart. Beside her, Nicolae Ceaușescu stands still, his posture stiff, as if holding on to some last fragment of pride. His face is the mask of resignation. No panic, no tears, only the cold acceptance of what's to come. There are no words, no final pleas for mercy. Instead, he hums a faint tune, a worker's anthem once his anthem, its melody haunting and hollow now, a symbol of everything that is unraveled. His voice trembles at first, but it becomes steady, unwavering as the soldiers take their positions. He stands there like a monument of what once was, a man defiant even in the face of death. The firing squad lines up, their rifles raised with a chilling precision. Everything about the moment feels suffocating. Time itself seems to slow as they await the final command. The world, once revolving around the power of the Ceaușescus, now pauses, holding its breath, as the people who once feared them stand in judgment. The cameras, once the instruments of their control, now capture their final moments, broadcast for all to see. The execution is not just the end of a life, but the final burial of a regime that thought it could never fall. Then the shots ring out, almost in unison, a brutal punctuation to the tragic saga of the Ceaușescu dictatorship. Elena jerks violently, her body spasming from the impact. Her final scream is cut off, abruptly, the life draining from her as her body collapses to the cold ground. The silence that follows is deafening. The crowd, if any remain to witness, stands still, not sure if they are seeing the end of the era or the beginning of something darker. Nicolae stands for just a moment longer, as if unaware of his own mortality. His body quivers for a brief second, but then he too falls to the ground. His body crumples, folding into itself like a broken statue, a monument to an empire that no longer exists. In the final moments, his face betrays nothing. No fear, no regret, just the stillness of a man who has finally been stripped of everything, including the illusion of invincibility. Romanian television, now an instrument of history's judgment, broadcasts the execution to the world. The grainy footage, raw and unfiltered, spreads like wildfire across the nation and beyond. The people of Romania, once terrified into silence, now watch as their oppressors lie lifeless on the cold ground. There is no triumph in this moment, only the haunting realization that this is the final judgment, the end of a chapter that will never be reopened. The dictator's body becomes a symbol of the collapse of his regime, a symbol of a nation's reclamation of its freedom. The streets of Bucharest, once a city defined by Ceaușescu's rule, now lie eerily silent. The sound of victory, of freedom, is not heard in the air, but it resounds in the hearts of the people. The Sukias, whose names were once whispered in terror, are now reduced to nothing more than the fallen remnants of a history that they could not control. The suffering they inflicted has found its release, but the cost is evident in the lives of those left behind. There is no celebration, no sense of triumph. The end of an era, however brutal, brings no joy. The pain of the past lingers in the hearts of those who survived, and the scars are not easily erased. The revolution has succeeded, but the scars left by the Ceaușescu regime remain, deeply embedded in the nation's psyche. It is the end of an era, but not the end of the nation's struggle. The world watches as the cameras zoom in on the lifeless bodies, capturing the grim truth of a dictatorship that has been torn down. The Ceaușescu are dead, but the questions remain. How could it have happened? How could a man so certain of his invincibility fall so quickly, so completely? The answers are buried in the ashes of the empire they built, but they will never be fully understood. The lessons, however, are clear. No regime, no matter how powerful, can last forever. Romania, now free, will rebuild. But as the bodies of the fallen rulers lie in the cold ground, the shadow of their reign will always remain. The revolution is over, but its echoes will continue to shape the future of the nation for years to come. Romania's revolution against Ceaușescu was not simply the end of a dictatorship. It was the rebirth of a nation. For years, the Romanian people had been suffocated under a regime that ruled through fear, intimidation, and control. Ceaușescu's reign was marked by bloodshed, loss, and silence. But the revolution that erupted in December 1989 shattered the walls of oppression, offering a glimmer of hope for the people who had lived in the shadows for so long. The fall of Ceaușescu was not just a political shift, it was a cultural awakening, a moment in history when the will of the people triumphed over tyranny. In the broader scope of history, Romania's revolution stands as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. It proves that no regime, no matter how entrenched, can withstand the collective will of ordinary people when they choose to rise against their oppressors. The revolution wasn't simply about overthrowing a dictator. It was about reclaiming freedom, dignity, and hope for a future that had seemed impossible just days before. The people who once cowered in fear, who once whispered behind closed doors, now had the courage to shout, to stand, to fight. Ceaușescu's fall wasn't just a result of political unrest. It was the culmination of years of suffering, a testament to the quiet resistance that had been brewing in the hearts of ordinary Romanians. His downfall ignited a wave of change that would sweep across Eastern Europe. Romania's revolution, though unique in its own right, became part of a larger tapestry of revolutions that toppled authoritarian regimes across the region. It marked a turning point, not just for Romania, but for the world. It showed that even the most oppressive, brutal systems can be dismantled when the people unite with courage and conviction. The legacy of this revolution is complex. It is one of both hope and pain, a duality that cannot be ignored. For all the triumph of the revolution, there were costs. There were lives lost, families shattered, and memories that would never fade. The scars left by Ceaușescu's regime are still felt in Romania today, echoes of a past that cannot be fully erased. But those scars do not define Romania's future. Instead, they are a reminder of the resilience of the people, a symbol of their ability to rise from the ashes of oppression and forge a new path. Romania's journey, like the journey of many nations that have struggled under tyranny, is far from over. The echoes of Ceaușescu's regime still linger in the country's politics, its culture, and its people. But the revolution is also a symbol of what is possible when people come together to fight for freedom and justice. Romania's place in the history of Eastern Europe is now indelible, a beacon of courage and defiance that continues to inspire others who live under oppressive regimes today. The fall of Ceaușescu was the beginning of a new chapter for Romania, one that, though painful and difficult, held the promise of a better future. As we reflect on the revolution, we must also reflect on the broader lessons it teaches us, that no dictatorship is invincible, that even the most brutal regimes can be overthrown, and that the courage of ordinary people can change the course of history. The story of Ceaușescu's downfall reminds us that we cannot remain passive in the face of injustice, that our voices, our actions, our unity are what make the difference. The fight for freedom is never easy, and it never ends. It is a constant battle, but it is a battle worth fighting. This revolution was not the end for Romania. It was only the beginning. The nation's journey toward true democracy and freedom has been long and difficult, but it has been built on the foundation of those who refuse to be silenced. Romania's story is a testament to the power of the people, their ability to rise up, to reclaim their dignity, and to rebuild a country shattered by fear and oppression. We've just journeyed through one of the most pivotal moments in history, and if you're still here, you understand the weight of what happened. But if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This is just the beginning. History is filled with stories like this, stories that deserve to be told. Like and hit that subscribe button now, so you don't miss out on the next deep dive into the dark corners of the past. And if you're still on the fence about joining Crime Core X, tell us in the comments why you're holding back. Don't let these powerful stories slip through your fingers. Subscribe now.